As you know, Millennium Development Goals is a compact between the North and the South. Though the first 7 goals, up to ensure environment sustainability, starting from eradicate extreme hunger and poverty, are the responsibilities of developing countries. Goal 8, which was highly negotiated, contested in terms of delivery by the rich countries. So it's a new kind of a compact between the North and South, where both the rich and the poor countries have undertaken commitments to deliver. Goal 8 is a global partnership for development. From the Millennium Campaign's perspective, very clearly, the Goal 8 represents 3 things: quantity and quality of aid, debt cancellation, and just and fair trade. And these are the 3 commitments that the donor countries are supposed to be fulfilling. The developed countries, rich countries are supposed to be fulfilling, while the developing countries are supposed to deliver good governance, good practices, slippages and leakages being in check, corruption being lessened to deliver on Goal 1 to 7. That's the global compact. And that's why Millennium Development Goals, because they are so measurable, so concrete, are the ones which is now the development agenda of the international community. What is the reality? This is the 2006 report. If you look at how many goals the world is off track, very clearly highlighting child mortality, maternal mortality. As of 2006, what they should have achieved and what they have not achieved is what this graph is showing you. Access to sanitation, and MDG 1, which is the target, one of the targets is hunger. Over last 2 years, post-2006, because of the food crisis, actually in Asia-Pacific region, hunger is growing, which also means, are we really keeping to the commitments that have been made in the Millennium Declaration signed by all our leaders in year 2000? From the Millennium Campaign's perspective, the division of responsibilities is very clear. The developed countries, the rich countries are supposed to achieve trade justice, debt cancellation, and increase quantity and quality of aid, while the developing countries are supposed to integrate MDGs into the policies, plans, and budgets so that their budgets allocations are consistent with the MDG priorities, and they have to build in accountability mechanisms. So from the perspective of the Millennium Campaign, it is very clear that MDGs 1 to 7 is about governance accountability. And MDG 8, which is the global partnership, is about trade justice, about aid effectiveness and aid quantity, and about the debt cancellation. As you know, the international development policy is characterized by 4 pillars. Of course, one of the key pillars is coming under discussion now heavily after financial crisis, is the pro-market reform, which has been pushed in many developed countries as the precondition many times. Political and governance reforms, so that political and governance systems are accustomed and are in tune with the development priorities. Poverty reduction, and a reform of aid delivery system in the light of the Paris Declaration on aid effectiveness and Accra. Where is Australia? You can see the chart. Only 5 countries in the world today from the OECD countries have achieved the 0.7% of gross national income commitment. The 5 countries, as you can see, Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg, Denmark, and Netherlands. From the OECD country, the country which has least achieved 0.7%, as you can see, is 0.16, United States. And Australia is between the overall DAC total and the United Kingdom. It is at 0.3. The globally accepted commitment by all countries is 0.7%. Many times, the kinds of debates around aid effectiveness, many donors do like to have projects which are visible. So investment in infrastructure, a road which is named for a donor, or a hospital which is named for a donor, or which could be said, oh, this was donated by so-and-so country. That is what is the obsession many times. A project approach, a pet project approach, and many times, I must tell you, in many countries, oh, this project was initiated because the foreign minister was very keen that we take up this project. And because he visited, and in his visit, he announced that this project will be taken up. Whether that project is consistent with the needs and the realities of that country or not is not really seen. So implementation of the development strategy as a whole, that needs to be in the overall context of country's needs and the country's development. And Paris Declaration is one way to move towards that. This is the roadmap that the Paris Declaration talks about in terms of mutual accountability, managing for results, harmonization of aid, alignment of aid, and finally the ownership. The countries, recipient countries, must totally own the agenda, and they are the ones who set the agenda for, and that is the only way we can actually move towards the effective development delivery in developing countries. 2 points which Paris Declaration does not include, and both those points I think are critical and need to be really looked at. One is the conditionality of the aid in terms of purchasing goods and services from the donor country. Also in terms of consultants and the study scholarship in the recipient countries to the donor country. That needs to be really reflected, whether that, how far this has been useful, and I can give you examples after examples in number of countries. For example, community mobilization expertise in a country like Bangladesh, which has a long NGO tradition. You have an expatriate going there for community mobilization expertise who doesn't speak the language, who doesn't understand what is happening on the ground. Is that acceptable? Is that desirable? I think are the issues. Last 2 minutes. Roles of citizens. I think this kind of a forum where OSED is basically promoting and supporting such forums, I think is very critical to really make citizens understand and build a political constituency, because the new administration, I think, is committed to enhancing not only quantity of aid, but the quality of aid. That commitment is there from the new administration. Does it have enough political constituency among you who says, yes, we support the government for its aid policies? And if that is not there, then many times governments can backtrack. And that is why such forums, I think, are very critical that are being supported. Advocacy in developing countries and developed countries is very critical in terms of looking at how do we draw the policies and manage relationships with the donor countries. And I gave you the example of Jakarta commitment, where all the donors come up together and sign up a commitment towards a particular plan of action, so that there is a movement towards the equality in the relationship that is being managed. MDGs have worked. We have 100 million more children since the Millennium Declaration going to school. You have 300,000 more people who have access to AIDS medication in Africa. So MDGs work. You have a situation where you have at least 33 countries whose debt was cancelled. And those countries have been able to transform their debt repayments back into their country's social investments. But still, anomalies continue. You have a situation where OECD countries pay $372 billion for agriculture support and agriculture subsidies, while the global aid in 2006 was only $104 billion. Agriculture subsidies in developed part of the world affect the taxpayers in those countries and affect many times the small and producers in the developing countries. And again, one can give examples after that. Let me conclude by this remark, which is not my remark, which is Hilary Benn, and the remark itself is quite clear. There are those who say that giving government support is wrong, but even the most enthusiastic supporters of civil society, and I am one, Hilary Benn is saying that, recognizing that ignoring governments and creating parallel system is not a long-term solution to corruption, nor a sustainable path to development. Should a farmer in Malawi to rely on an NGO for health and education like you and me, she wants justice, she wants her rights and that of her children realized, and she will only get that in the long term from a good government. That is where I would like to end. Thank you very much.